Palm Sunday. I'd like to share with you a message that has been dwelling in my heart for a while. I'd like to begin by telling you about an oil man from Oklahoma. This took place several years ago. An oil baron from Oklahoma passed away. He was quite wealthy, and his will was quite complicated, and it took several years for it to go through probate court. But finally, it was all done, and just like the dramatic scene in the movie, gathered all the relatives in the big conference room of the attorney's office, and they gathered to read the will. There were many cousins there, and his daughter and his son. Here's what the lawyer had to say. To my daughter Nancy, I leave my ranch with all of the land and livestock. To my son George, I leave the First National Bank of Oklahoma City. To my good friend and neighbor Irene, I leave my portfolio of oil stocks and other investments. To my niece Sarah, I leave the office building in Tulsa. And as to the rest of you who have wondered all your years if I would remember you in my will, please rest assured I remembered you. They came to the conference room with great expectations, and they left with great disappointment. This morning, this is Palm Sunday, and it could just as easily have been recorded in history as Expectation Sunday. When a woman is pregnant, how do we describe her? What is one of the ways that we describe a pregnant woman? You say she is expectant. She's expecting something is going to happen at some point. Palm Sunday could easily have been called Expectation Sunday, or Great Expectations. I don't know if English literature classes still require Great Expectations to be read. How many people read Charles Dickens' novel, Great Expectations, in high school? Yeah, right. The point of that novel was kind of the point of Palm Sunday, in a way, the moral of the story, as it were. Well, we are working our way through the Gospel of Luke. And if Luke had something to say about Palm Sunday, we'd be reading a Luke scripture this morning, but he doesn't mention it. He makes no record of it whatsoever. But John does. Remember, the Gospel of John was partially written to kind of fill in the blanks left by the other Gospels. So we're going to read from John chapter 12 this morning. This is the classic Palm Sunday passage. You can follow along on the overhead screen. The large crowd of the Jews that learned that he was there, and they came, not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away, were believing in Jesus. How about that? They saw somebody resurrected and they believed in Jesus. On the next day, the large crowd who had come to the feast, when they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, took the branches of the palm trees and went out to meet him and began to shout, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. Jesus, finding a young donkey, sat on it, as it is written, Fear not, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. These things disciples did not understand at the first. But when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things were written of him, and that they had done these things to him. So the people who were with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to testify about him. For this reason also the people went and met him, when they heard that he had performed this sign, because they had heard he performed this sign. So the Pharisees said to one another, You see, you're not doing any good. Look, the world has gone after him. The word of God for the people of God. Before I came to Indiana, I don't know if I put in the story or not, but before I came to Indiana, I served in Kansas. And one of the parishioners I had in Kansas owned a couple or three hospice caregiving services. And he and his wife had 8 box seats at the Royals games. Season tickets, that's the word I'm looking for. You'll get old someday. You won't be able to remember it. And so we got invited to many Royals games, and we went to many Royals games, and eventually we became quasi-Royal fans, even though I'm a Reds fan at heart. And I have the t-shirts to prove that I'm a Royals fan. Now, when we got there in 2010, the Kansas City Royals were not very good, and no one had any expectations of them. And when we went to the ballpark, you'd see a lot of blue seats, because there weren't any people in them. But by 2014, something extraordinary happened. In 2014, these same miserable, lousy Kansas City Royals who had the same uniforms on suddenly finished the season with a strong thrust. And they won their playoffs. And they went to the World Series, and they took the San Francisco Giants to the 9th inning of the 7th game before they lost. Man, when 2015 rolled around, you want to talk about expectations. The papers and the TV stations and the sportscasters were, this year. Man. And when we went to the ballpark that year, you couldn't find any blue seats. You couldn't find any parking places. Except these guys had their own reserved places. They had great expectations. We brought back the same roster. We brought some more pitchers in. And guess what happened in 2015? The Kansas City Royals lived up to their name. They were royalty of baseball. They won the World Series. And then they had a celebration, had a parade through downtown Kansas City. And they expected about 200,000 people to come out to the parade and gather around Union Station, which was this old railroad station that had been converted into an exhibition hall. But right across the street from there was a great big giant hill, and people would sit on that hill and watch whatever was going on in the front of Union Station. And that's where they chose to have the celebration. 200,000 people showed up before the first Royals player got there. And then 400,000 showed up. And then 600,000. And finally, they estimate that there were more than 800,000 people gathered around to cheer and scream for the Royals, champions of baseball. On this particular week in Jerusalem, historians have estimated that more than 400,000 people were in Jerusalem for the Passover feast. And hundreds of them, thousands of them, came out to watch Jesus come into Jerusalem. More than 2,000 years ago, thousands, tens of thousands of people lined the street to see one man sitting on a donkey, followed by roughly 200 of his own followers and women and disciples. And they got so excited. In the case of the Royals had to win the World Series, and then we had a victory parade. In the case of Jesus, we had the victory parade because everybody knew what was going to happen. I mean, it was Passover. If you're going to crown a new king who comes out of the religious tradition, what better weekend, what better day to announce the new king? They had great expectations. The interesting question is, what do you and I expect this morning as we sit here? What do you and I expect when we come here? In 1972, NASA, using the best technology that it had, launched an exploratory spacecraft they dubbed Pioneer 10. Pioneer 10's job was to reach the planet Jupiter, hopefully, and send back data that it picked up by going around Jupiter. But they didn't have very much expectations of it getting there. They really didn't expect it to fulfill its mission because they were testing new technology and they weren't even sure it was going to work. So they launched this thing, and it went past through an asteroid belt, and they were sure that was going to destroy it, but it didn't. Pioneer 10 got to Jupiter, and it did what it was supposed to do. And then it got caught in Jupiter's gravity, which no one expected. And like a hula hoop going around the planet, it got caught in the gravity, and it got going so fast that Jupiter's gravity slung it out into space. And it went out beyond our solar system. 1 billion miles later, it went by the next planet, whichever one, I can't remember. Saturn. Sent back pictures and information about Saturn. We had no idea. At 2 billion years, it went by 1 billion miles, it went by Neptune. At 3 billion miles, it went by Uranus. 5 billion miles, it went by Pluto. 25 years after it was launched with extremely low expectations, it was still broadcasting information. And finally, in the year 2003, 2001, 31 years after it was launched, 2003, at 7.5 billion miles from Earth, it stopped sending back signals. And it raised the expectation level of NASA scientists for everything they did thereafter, and it encouraged them, and they began to expect more, and they got more with every subsequent launch. The question that God is asking Dave Richardson this morning, what did I expect to happen when I came to church this morning? What did I expect to happen when I accepted the pastor at Rushville Baptist? What do you expect when you come into this building and you come into the presence of God? What do you expect? I think it's a very challenging question. I think it's a very important question. The day that Jesus rode his donkey into Jerusalem, they came out with great expectations. And do you know what they were expecting? They were expecting Jesus to be a military king, as I told you multiple times. They were expecting him to conquer everybody nearby and to get rid of the Romans whom everybody hated, and make the economy better and bring peace and comfort. They had great expectations. They came out to cheer him and to yell and to scream. Palm Sunday generally happens a little later in spring. And when it does, we have great expectations that normally happen around Palm Sunday. We start looking for the weather to get warmer. We start looking for daffodils and crocuses to bloom. Some of them are out already, frozen stiff as a board. We start looking for fruit trees to blossom. The farmers start looking and putting about seed in the ground. Not yet, but they're thinking about it. We have expectations that are based around the season of Palm Sunday. But what expectations do we have about church, about God? People came out, pouring out onto the streets to yell and scream because they were expecting a king. I'd like to highlight 4 things that they said as they were out there. It gives us a clue as to what was going on. And then we'll wrap things up. People were, first of all, they were taking off their clothes and they were throwing their coats down in the street. That doesn't mean anything to us, but in the first century, that was a sign of loyalty. Okay? If a new king came along and you took your outer garment off and threw it down in front of the king, you were saying, I will do whatever you tell me to do. I am your servant. Second of all, when they grabbed palm branches, because palm branches were everywhere. It's like walnut trees in Indiana. And they grabbed the palm branches off the ground, and they grabbed the ones they could grab off the trees, and they started waving them. But there was more than that. Palm branches represent, rejoicing. Rejoicing. As my brother Ofer Levy said, the Hebrew word for rejoicing is hallelujah. They were rejoicing at the new king. Third of all, they were shouting, blessed is he. That's a quote from a prophecy about a new king. And lastly, they were shouting Hosanna, which literally translates, save us. They wanted to be saved. They came expecting. The question is, what do you and I expect to happen? The interesting thing about expectations is we get what we expect more often than not. There was a scientist, and I can't remember the day or the time, Giles Kraft was a British scientist. He did an experiment. Have you ever heard anybody talk about the Monday morning blues? People tend to think that Mondays are worse than every other day of the week, and Fridays are the best day of the week. But anyway, he tried to prove or disprove this whole theory of Monday morning blues. So he brought together a large cross-section of people from every walk of life and every generation, and he divided them into 3 groups. In one group, he spent a considerable amount of time explaining the scientific evidence that had been found that supports the theory of Monday morning blues. He wrote it all, by the way. There wasn't a word of truth in it. But he presented it, and he passionately spoke to this group over here about the reality of Monday morning blues. And then he took the second group, and he explained to them in great depth with charts and numbers that science had completely disproven the whole Monday morning blues thing. There was no truth to it whatsoever. And then the third group, he told them nothing other than they were being involved in a study about Monday morning blues. Right? And he watched them for almost a year. And he kept interviewing them and recording their information. At the end of the year, what do you think happened with each of the 3 groups? The group that he told that there was no truth whatsoever to the nonsense of Monday morning blues experienced zero experiences of Monday morning blues. The group in the middle, who he said they were participating in it, but he didn't tell them either way which way to think, there was a few that experienced Monday morning blues, but the vast majority did not. The group that he said there was scientific evidence to justify and prove that there was a reality of Monday morning blues had 100% experience of Monday morning blues for an entire year. What's the point of the study, and why do I bring it up? You get what you expect. So what do you expect when you come to church? What do you expect of your Sunday morning service? It's been my experience when people come expecting nothing from church, you know what they get when they leave? Nothing. And if you come to church and you walk away and you say, I didn't get anything out of church, well, guess what? Not on me. Not on Kathy. It's because you didn't come expecting anything. You don't believe anything can happen here. You don't believe in the reality of God or the Holy Spirit or that any of this makes any sense. You're just sitting there, barking time until it's time to go eat lunch and beat the Methodist to the diner. When we come expecting, we receive. But when we come expecting nothing, we get nothing. Pam and I got married on a very interesting day. I told you this before. This next week is Sunday, right? But what else is unique about next Sunday? It's April Fool's Day. And that means something very special to Pam and I. Because I was shipping out to go to Turkey, and we had a 12-day window to get married in, and she was still in college, and there was one Saturday available. And it was April Fool's Day. And I've never forgotten my anniversary once. But Pam was a hard sell. I had to work hard to convince her that I was the guy. I had great expectations. I was so excited when I met her. It took her 6 months to say the L word. I was popping it out within 3 days. Man, you're the one. I'm in love with you. She ran like a rabbit the opposite direction. She'd tell you the same thing. I scared her. In case you haven't noticed, when my personality cranks up and I get intense, it's pretty intense. And she ran like a rabbit. The point of the story is, if she and I got married with no expectations, how long do you think that marriage would have lasted? About that long. We would have made it past the honeymoon. But you know the interesting thing about both of us? She was raised in a Catholic home. And she was taught that when you come into a relationship, you give. You don't come to get. And I was raised in a Christian home, congregational home to start with. And I was taught you enter a relationship forever to give, not to get. An awful lot of people come to church with the expectation that Jesus is going to give me everything I want. A lot of people look at prayer and they think prayer is my way to put the key in the lock and open the door and God will give me everything I want. If you come expecting Jesus or the church or the Holy Spirit or God to give you everything you want, no matter, even though you expect something to happen, you're not going to get anything but disappointment. Because coming to Jesus, coming to church is not about expecting to get. There's a lot of ironies in Christianity, a lot of ironies in the Bible, you know, where it doesn't look like that should be true, but it's really true. And one of those ironies is, if you expect nothing, you get nothing. If you come to get, you don't get anything. But if you come to give, you get everything. I sat with the deacons a few days ago, and one of them mentioned this story about how cool it is to give anonymously to other people and make their lives better. It is just the coolest thing in the world. You get so much when you do something really cool like that. What did we come expecting to happen this morning? Did we come expecting anything? What you come expecting is what you get. If you come to church for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and gotten nothing, it's because you expected nothing. And the lesson that was pounded into my heart and spirit this week is when we are come expecting something good to happen, something good will happen. When we come expecting to give to Jesus Christ, we get. But if we come looking to get, we get nothing. You know, I pound on Joel Osteen sometimes. And it annoys me that he is so popular, not because I want to be popular, but it annoys me because he picks and chooses the passages from the Bible that fit the point he's trying to make. I bet you my week's salary, there's not a person in this room who's ever heard Joel Osteen say heaven. Or maybe even Jesus. Joel Osteen is so successful because he gives people what they want to hear. Come to Jesus and God will bless you. Come to God. God wants to bless you, not Jesus. Come to God. It's what everybody wants to hear. But the reality is when you come to get, you get nothing. All right, so what were we trying to learn today? When we come to church, we must come expecting something to happen. If we expect nothing, we get nothing. And if we come to get, we get everything only when we give everything. What did you come expecting this morning? Holy Father, thank you for this message. And help me to understand and appreciate that when I come expecting you to work through the words that you have given me, when I come expecting lives to be changed by your hand, when I come expecting hearts to be broken and lives to be given to you in a salvation experience, it happens. When I come expecting people to fall asleep, it happens. When I come expecting people to be bored and looking at their phones, it happens. Holy Father, may the people in this room understand that what you are offering is unbelievable. It is so good. But we have to expect something. We have to come looking for something. We have to come with a humble heart who wants to receive something. I pray this day, Father, for any in this room who up to now have come to church and received nothing, that they might say now to you, I want to receive something. I want to know for sure if you're there. Change that life as they open their heart to you. And may we grow in our understanding and our expectations. These things I ask in the name of Jesus Christ.